Paulogia, and another edition of Ham and Egg News, where we react to Ken Ham reacting to things. If you're new to the channel, take a second to tap on the subscribe button so that you'll be notified when new science, theology, and news videos come along.
They went to Buddy Davis's class. So, Brazilian accent, American accent, Australian accent. So this truly is an international answers news.
And I'm Canadian, and I have a Canadian accent. I mean, how much more international can we get?
I don't know. I think you might need an English person in there. Do you know any?
Rachel Oates, you have the greatest British accent I know. Where did you come from? Wow.
Sometimes I just hang around in the back of your flat. You don't even know. I'm just there watching you fall.
As far as I can tell, there's a huge party going on back there that I'm never aware of. I've been hearing your name coming up in creation circles recently, and I can't seem to place where have I been hearing your name.
I don't know. I feel like if you can't think of it off the top of your head, it's probably not that important. It was probably just some nobody who said it. I don't know.
You're probably right. I mean, if it was important, we'll think of it later.
Yeah.
So, as long as you're here, are you willing to take a look and see what Ken Ham says today?
Well, I thought we were friends, and now you want to torture me, so I'm not sure. But as a favor to you, yeah, let's do it.
Carl Sagan's daughter on science and spirituality. And so many of you know, I'm assuming, who Carl Sagan is. He was the host of the television show Cosmos, and his daughter's written a new book called For Small Creatures Such as We, Rituals for Finding Meaning in Our Unlikely World.
I think it's a great reminder to us of the incredible responsibility of parents, because the way in which they train their children.
So that was the bit that I found really, really interesting when I watched this. Of course, he's a fan of training children, not raising kids, training them. It's just like the pearls. I don't know if you've seen my books on them, to train up a child. So there's a lot of this comparing children to dogs and animals and so on, because, who wants to raise an independent human being who can think for themselves, Who wants to raise someone who understands the consequence of their actions? When instead, you can have a child who just knows how to say, yes, sir, no, sir, and only does what you say and never questions why. And I'm like, of course, Ken is into that. It's just bizarre to me that they think kids are these little things to be molded into little clones of them rather than individuals that you just help raise. And I don't know. It's an odd one, isn't it?
It was disturbing to me, and the article didn't help here, but we're framing this young lady as Carl Sagan's daughter. That we're not framing her as her own person who has published a book.
Yep.
And he's now going to, psychoanalyze why she came up with these ideas because of indoctrination. I call it Ken-splaining on our show.
I love that. I mean, as a woman, I know that we can't have original ideas ever, so I'm totally with Ken on this one.
So let's look at what her father taught her. Carl Sagan was very famous for this particular comment.
Are you old enough to remember Cosmos and Carl Sagan?
So this is going to be a weird story. My ex actually used to fall asleep listening to Carl Sagan videos. So I am very familiar with Carl Sagan.
Perfect. That's not the way most people are introduced. Fine.
Cosmos is all it is, or ever was, or ever will be.
Well, that's just a terrible impression of Carl Sagan.
And this was another one of the famous ones of Carl Sagan. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe.
Maybe I'll put in the actual Cosmos clips instead.
Oh, that would be nice. A little treat, to break up the monotony of Ken.
Consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves.
In other words, the Earth is just this little speck of dust in this universe, and basically, it's totally meaningless and all the rest.
Do you see the hypocrisy in what you're saying? With Ken, so much of what he writes about is just, they're words for the sake of it. There's no, meaning or substance to them. And so, to try and apply that to anything Carl Sagan wrote or said is really bizarre to me. one thing I love about Carl Sagan is that I feel like he was very careful with his words, and everything was picked for a reason. And I don't know, I feel like to miss that point is just... it's a little bit sad, isn't it?
You see that she's searching for meaning and purpose, because from an atheistic standpoint, there is no meaning and purpose in life, essentially.
Certainly
right?
no ultimate meaning.
There's no ultimate
Because
meaning,
atheists try to claim, well, we can make meaning while we're here. Well, so what? When you die, according to you, that's the end of you, so there's no ultimate purpose and meaning. It's all meaningless. So why'd you write the book anyway?
That is one of those things that gets me like so mad. It's like, just because it's not an ultimate meaning or purpose or something that we all share, it doesn't mean it's not important. Yeah, this kind of gets to me a bit. I'm like, oh, so why did you write the book anyway? I'm like, oh, just like belittle her whole life, why don't you?
You know, if that was true, like, what is the ultimate purpose of the meal you're going to have next? There isn't one.
Yeah.
So why is Ken having food?
That is true. And I mean, if the ultimate purpose is just to end up with God eventually, why don't we all, appoint one murderer to kill us who's going to sacrifice himself and go to hell, while the rest of us die and end up with God straight away?
Ooh, and I bet you get a lot of volunteers.
She says, my parents taught me Bible stories, not as history, but as important pillars of civilization. So it's kind of interesting. We talk here a lot. She even says I had a Noah's Ark set. I'm guessing it was a bathtub ark, probably, not like the actual ark.
Do you know what Georgia means by bathtub ark?
No, I was confused by that. I was actually going to ask you.
If you've ever seen a Sunday school cartoon depiction of Noah's Ark, where the giraffe heads are popping out a top window, and a few dozen other animals are on the top with their heads dangling, that's a bathtub ark. Both because of the shape of the boat, and probably also because they make them as toys for kids to play in the bathtub. Answers in Genesis are outraged by such things, because they think it's this depiction that makes the story seem silly, instead of the details of this very, very real event that's very realistic, and their version of the one true ark.
That happens to flood.
Happens to flood.
I do find it interesting, though, because it sounds like her childhood was very similar to mine, in that I was taught a lot of, like, the Bible stories and stuff in school, but I always took them to be, like, teachings about how to be a good person and how to behave, and I took, like, the morals and stuff away from it, rather than this is fact and it happened. They're mocking the fact that she has been taught about it, but not taught that it's truth, which I find odd, because if they had any faith in their actual religion, they would think, well, anyone who knows about it is going to believe in it.
Because she says there's intrinsically good news that no matter what tomorrow, the light will begin to return. And I'm like, but how do you know? From a completely atheistic standpoint, you don't. That is based on the foundation of the Word of God that says in Genesis 8:22 that these things will continue. Otherwise, in a totally random, purposeless, meaningless universe.
That's the bit that annoys me, the random and meaningless bit. Like, without a god, that doesn't automatically make the universe random and meaningless. Like I say, we have laws, we have patterns, we have certain rules that we know that certain particles and things follow. So we know how to expect that they're going to act. It's not random. And even if it was, that wouldn't make it meaningless. They're like ascribing these values to atheism that just aren't there. It's really bizarre, isn't it? Just like the level of hypocrisy in all three of them just kind of gets to me a bit.
I also have this hard time imagining what a Christian thinks, like, that the universe is just desperately trying to act in a different way, and only God 24/7 is, like, stopping the universe's properties from changing. Like, I have a hard time even envisioning what they think would happen without God holding it back. I don't know.
It's almost like they're ascribing agency to, like, every single particle, thinking, like, each particle has this, like, mind of its own, and it's like, oh, I'm going to behave this way unless God stops me.
Right.
Which would be quite fun,
well,
but...
I mean, ascribing agency is probably the root of the problem in the first place.
Yes. Well, yes.
You can't know that the sun will rise tomorrow. We only know that. They're borrowing from the Bible, and they don't even realize.
Well, I don't think that's faith. That's just a basic understanding of, like, laws and patterns in the universe. We understand them, and we know that it's not 100% guaranteed to happen, but it's most likely to happen. So we live our lives following these patterns and rules until something changes. And I feel like it's like that with God. We don't 100% know he doesn't exist, but we might as well carry on acting as though he doesn't until we get some inclination that he does, until something changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the best answer to a question is, I don't know until you know.
Exactly.
Why she cares about her daughter is it just like we're all animals.
Right.
It just...
What you definitely never see are animals caring for their children.
Oh, never. And you never see humans caring for animals either.
No.
No. There's actually a great book called, I think it's The Secret Life of Animals or something like that. And it's really interesting because like they have like a whole chapter about showing how animals care for other animals and animals showing empathy and animals helping out other injured parties even when it's like to the detriment of themselves, and it's really, really interesting.
And the interesting thing, she reminds me of Bill Nye.
Like that's an insult.
That's right. But I think Bill Nye is also the only atheist he's spoken to in the last 20 years.
Don't say that when I got a mouthful of drink. I really joke.
Yeah, don't do that. I don't want to animate a spit take. I'm lazy.
And she says that the cells in our bodies came from stars many light years away. For me, like my parents, see again the emphasis on parents, her parents influenced her. That's why it's so important that parents do what the Bible says and teach their children the things of God.
It's just a whole other level of hypocrisy. It's so weird. So Ken is like ascribing her parents, saying like, oh, her parents taught her atheism. No, they didn't. She said earlier, my parents taught me how to think, they taught me how to question, they taught me all these different like religions and all this different stuff, and they taught me how to pick it out for myself. And he's just like, no, I don't like that because you came to the wrong conclusions. It's so weird.
She does say at the very end, we're actually very wholesome, I swear. Now, and atheists sometimes will say, we say that they're not good people. They can do good things, but they don't have an ultimate foundation for defining good and doing good things.
This annoys me. It's like, okay, so doing good things on their own isn't enough. Doing good things for the sake of doing good things isn't enough. Doing good things because you care about people isn't enough. You have to do things because of God. Where is the logic in that?
Right, so being good on your own, that's bad. But if you are good so that you get that eternal reward...
That's
better.
good. Yeah. Being good is only good if you're doing it for selfish reasons, apparently.
Right.
It's a book to really read about the hopelessness of those who reject God. That's what it's really
And
all
it's
about.
sad because...
I love how he hasn't actually read the book. He's just basing it on this one article, and he's like, this is a book about the hopelessness of people without God. He's so sure. I'm like, do you want to try reading it before you say that?
In fairness, they refuse to read 5-page science articles.
That is true. Well, there's just a lot of big words.
That's true. Why do that when Fox News tells you what it means?
Exactly. You know?
All right. Only homophobes think Dem Buttigieg's same-sex marriage not traditional, liberal host claim. She's talking about Pete Buttigieg, and she's having a problem with why Christians basically would still have any issues with him, because after all, he's married, and his spouse stays at home, actually, doesn't work outside the home. He does. So it's a traditional marriage.
Notice, if you disagree with same-sex marriage, you're immediately a homophobe.
I know he's saying it sarcastically, but yeah, no, I agree. It's like, yes, you finally get something, Ken.
Were you okay with their definition of traditional marriage there?
I'm not sure we really know what traditional marriage is. It depends on the culture, doesn't it? Like 2 years ago now, it was ages, I did this whole video about like the history of marriage and where it came from and how it evolved in all these different cultures and stuff. But these were partnerships of convenience, they were partnerships centered around safety, and they were partnerships centered around survival and trying to make sure their species and their genes continued and were passed on. And their idea of traditional marriage is this one very set idea that they think is written about in the Bible, that was written at a certain time and so on. But before that, people had partnerships and relationships and agreements that were very different from what they consider traditional marriage. So, yeah, I don't know. They have a very narrow view, don't they?
They do. I think for them, traditional means whatever was happening in 1950.
Yes.
Anything before or after that is bad. Yeah.
So, like, when parts of the Bible were written here, it was very common for people in, like, Rome and Greece to, sometimes they would be married and have partnerships. Sometimes those would be with people of the same sex. Sometimes they would be married, but they would have people that they just had sex with on the side, both men and women. That has a longer history than just one man, one woman. So really, what is traditional?
But who defines traditional?
Yeah.
See, unless it's biblical, then traditional. What does that mean? It's just an opinion.
Perhaps someone should explain to Ken that the Gospels are just a written record of early church traditions about Jesus.
Unless we have a foundation and an absolute authority for it. And that's the point.
What I find really interesting, though, about people like Ken and just answers in Genesis in general, is that so much of what they say just completely undermines what they're trying to get across. Because they're like, well, if we don't have a biblical foundation, people can do this and people can do this. And we're like, well, great, we can't trust the Bible for this and this and this. And the Bible should be able to tell us about this and this. So yeah, you're right. People can do whatever they want.
Often I actually find Answers in Genesis interpretation of the Bible quite refreshing, because I actually often agree. They will say something like, well, if there was no Adam and Jesus thought there was Adam, why are we bothering listening to Jesus? And I'm kind of like, yeah.
Exactly. Honestly, they do half our work for us. Great.
He did make me an atheist.
See, he does do some good.
He has a pro-abortion position. He says life begins with breath. Well, that's not what the scripture says.
Right.
Life does not begin with breath. Life begins at fertilization.
If I remember correctly, around 2/3 of fertilized eggs in humans fail to actually implant and therefore never develop.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say about only 20% do. So I think that's probably about right. And the number that actually implant but then miscarry within the first 2 weeks is huge as well. I think overall the number of fertilized eggs that make it to a full-term pregnancy is like tiny. It's in the single figure percentages.
Right. So is God aborting all those? Are we going to see all those people in heaven, those fertilized eggs?
You know, God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? I'll be honest, I think both of them are wrong here. I don't think life begins at breath. And I don't think it matters if life begins at conception or not. I think what matters is, when does life become sentient? And I've spoken about this like at length in various videos, but I think it doesn't matter whether it's alive or not. I think what matters is what level of sentience it has. When does it become an individual? When does it have consciousness? When is it able to kind of think for itself or survive itself without a host? That kind of stuff. So, you know, people don't have a problem taking antibiotics and killing thousands of bacteria in them. Those bacteria are alive. Why don't we have a problem killing them? But they do have a problem getting rid of one fertilized egg. I don't think they understand what the difference is between a fertilized egg and an embryo and a fetus and a baby. I don't think they understand the differences between each of those things and the various stages of development. I don't think they get it. And I know it sounds horrible, but yeah.
The article is actually called The End of Babies. Each couple needs to have at least 2 children to replace themselves. And right now, the birth rate, even in America, is less than that.
You're aware of the world's dangerous underpopulation problem, are you not?
Overpopulation.
No, we're dangerously underpopulated.
Wait,
and
are you being sarcastic?
I was just being...
Oh my god, I was going to say.
No,
You had me so worried then.
But Georgia seems to think that it's going to be a huge problem if for some reason the population dips, which is just hilarious.
It's so bizarre to me. But like, do they not realize that, while people might be having less kids in more developed countries, in countries like Niger, I think the birth rate per woman is something like 7 kids.
Wow.
It's like they're so focused on reproducing people like them. They don't think about what's happening in the rest of the world and the fact that, you know, it is going to be dangerously overpopulated. And that the people who have the option to use contraception or choose not to have kids or stuff do have a responsibility to make sure we don't get to a crisis point, I think.
Despite the international flavor they claim to have here, it's very American-centric, or at least Western world-centric.
I don't want to sound like one of those people, but it feels like a very, like, white middle-class thing. You know? Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah. They're like, you know, people like us, they should have at least 2 kids to replace the parents and remember that. And I'm like, you know, some people can't even afford to have 1 kid. Like, do you know what that's like? And they're just expecting everyone to do it. It's weird. And this is, of course, like, ignoring the people like me who decide, like, actively decide, I don't want children. I don't feel like I have a responsibility to put a little replacement out there for myself. I don't think the world needs it. I'd rather make my impact on the world by helping, like, raise my niece and nephew and looking after them and just kind of making content that I hope helps and educates other people. That's what I want to do rather than just passing on my genetics.
Well, you are clearly part of the problem.
I know.
You know, when we got this article, I looked at it, it's millions of pages long. It took me ages to read through this, and it's...
I love it. He's just proving your point from earlier.
I didn't know that was coming up. That's pretty funny.
Oh, he's amazing.
TLDR. All right.
Really, this whole article treats children as a commodity.
Right.
Children aren't commodities, but also have as many as you can, no matter what your circumstances are. That makes sense.
At least, I feel a bit better now knowing that the reason I don't want to have kids is because probably demons, you know.
Ooh. But you put out a video recently where children are filled with demons, so wouldn't the demons want more children?
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, no, the author of that book, she said that apparently even fertilized eggs can be possessed by demons, so...
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh, so maybe that's what it is.
That's where they're going.
Yeah. All those miscarriages, all those fertilized eggs that don't implant, it's demons. We are learning so much today, Paul.
All coming together. This is perfect.
Women who don't get married, but they use...
Sperm banks.
Yeah, in vitro fertilization and so on. And they have children, but they don't get married, so they're called solomors.
Disgusting. How dare a woman think she can raise a kid herself?
But I'm confused, because didn't they just spend the first few minutes here admonishing people for not having children? Now women are finding ways to have children, but they're also bad?
Yeah, you see, the thing is, you can only have kids if it's in their way. They have a very strict set of rules.
Oh, I see.
You gotta get it right, you know? Can't just have anyone raising a kid, it's gotta be the white middle classes.
Think of the world our kids are growing up in, and all the terms with LGBTQ and all the different supposed pronouns they have now. And
it's almost like it'd be better not to have kids in a world this topsy-turvy.
That's what's happening.
It's really
in our
sad
culture.
that here in the article they put like child-free. Look at the term that they use, child-free.
I love that term. Like, if people ask me, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm child-free by choice. That is my choice. I don't want it. I love it. It does kind of summarize the fact that you're choosing not to have kids. You're choosing not to have them as part of your life. It's not childless, because that makes it sound like you're missing something. Do you know what I mean?
I think a childless would imply that you were hoping to have some one day.
Yes. Yeah. It's like, or I don't have kids for now. I'm childless for now. But child-free is like, yes, this is my choice. It's quite an empowering statement. I like it. I just find it funny that they're mocking it like, child-free, what is this? Who would want that? As a woman, I'm just a baby factory.
You know what they don't talk about? They have killed millions of children by abortion.
Every day.
Can you imagine how much more populated the world would be if all those aborted babies were born? So I actually brought this up in a conversation with Steve and Alex. And Alex didn't like this point. And I don't know if it's just because he didn't have an answer to me, but he was like, oh, money isn't relevant. I'm like, no, it is. I said to him, the number of babies that were aborted in the UK in 1 year cost us X amount of money. If those babies had all been born to parents who didn't want them or couldn't afford them or whatever, it would cost us this much in benefits, this much in putting them into social services and stuff, this much for childbirth with the NHS and blah, blah, blah. And it came to something like an extra £4 billion. And I was like, where the hell do you find that money? He was like, it's not relevant. This is Alex. And I was like, no, but it is, because abortion is a practical issue as well as a philosophical and moral one. If you are going to argue against abortion and say we shouldn't allow it, you need to tell me, where do we find the money and where do we find the people to raise those babies? And that's before we even think about the NHS costs for the next, 70 years of their life. That's before we even think about money for educating them. That's before we even think about where they're going to live, housing, where are we going to find jobs for them? If you're going to argue against abortion, you need to tell me, how do we raise those babies once they're born?
Even for parents who very much want children, to do so without a financial plan is just plain irresponsible. And even in the Old Testament, young men were encouraged to establish some kind of household before having a family. Canon companies seem to think that limiting your number of kids to the number of kids you can afford is some kind of sin.
People, sometimes they just look at kids as something like it's like a burden.
A burden.
Just like something that it's heavy and I don't want to carry.
It's because to some people, kids are a burden. To some people, they're this amazing gift and it's an amazing thing. But to others, they're a burden. You can't assume it's the same for every single person.
The implication here is that it is a woman's obligation to have children above all other things.
Well, it's interesting. We've got some good comments on here. Of course, we have a troll, and we get these trolls that come on here making stupid statements.
Was it you, Paul?
I think they mean us. Oh. I feel like there were some stupid statements before we got here, but, whatever.
These trolls that come on here making stupid statements. Like one of them is, no one can afford children.
I don't actually think that the person who posted "no one can afford children" was being a troll. I think that was meant to be a joke about how the expenses that come with having kids seems to never end.
They're so expensive. Ooh, yeah.
I hear parents making this kind of hyperbolic statement all the time, but in jest, to laugh at a common experience, not to make some kind of definitive conclusion from an in-depth financial analysis.
The transformed wife wrote this whole blog post. The bit that really annoys me is the whole, I will never understand how women can prefer careers over having precious babies. You might not understand, but I do. I don't understand how any woman would choose sticky, slimy, stinky, body-ruining, resource-sucking, little parasitic, small, dependent people. Because someone said to her, I can't afford to have kids right now, but I want a big family. And she was like, well, in that case, you change everything, and you can do this on one income because women shouldn't work. You just need to cut down on this and cut down on this and cut down on this and stop doing this and stop doing this. And I'm like, okay, so the only thing in a woman's life should be raising kids. Everything else goes out the window just for kids. And you have to do that. You have to make these sacrifices to have kids, even if you don't want to, because you happen to have been born with a vagina.
And on the flip side of that, if you're the kind of person who isn't fully willing and able to make serious and significant sacrifices in your life for the sake of a child, then please don't have a child. The population is going to be fine without you. Having a child whose second priority isn't doing anyone any favors.
And I'm not, so they're not.
Exactly.
And that makes me a demon-possessed harlot or something.
Or you're just not fulfilling your ultimate purpose, which you would know if
I was a Christian. Damn it.
All these incentives, and they're still not having it, which shows that it's really not about the economy or anything.
It's not.
I don't think anyone goes into having kids saying, you know what, if I don't have kids, the economy's going to collapse, so I'm going to take one for the country here.
I would love if someone did that.
It's always personal reasons. Mm-hmm. It's ridiculous.
It's about the God of self, right? And not wanting to.
And you know what? Something that has really, I think, helped this situation come about is feminism. Because feminism has been an attack on women.
Oh, I love this argument. This whole, feminism has ruined women. Meh. I don't see how they can really see everything that feminism has done and see it as a bad thing. It's not saying women have to do this. It's not saying women have to do this. It's just giving us the opportunity, Like women fighting for the vote. We have the opportunity to vote now. If you don't want to vote as a woman, absolutely fine. There's nothing saying you have to. But it's nice to have that opportunity. For me, feminism is about equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. And it's having those opportunities that's important to me. So I want to be able to say, I have this control over my body. I'm going to choose whether I want to have a kid or not. If I have a kid, I want to choose when I have a kid and how many I have. Feminism is all about giving people those options. And so if women want to stay at home and raise kids and be a housewife and a mother, they can do that. And if they don't have to. Feminism isn't destroying anything or taking away opportunities or saying you can't be a housewife anymore, you can't be a mother anymore. It's just saying, hey, you have the option to do what you want. And I think they just miss that completely. And it really annoys me.
Amen.
Sorry, slight rant there.
No, I love it.
True, that's actually already happening in places like Japan and in Asia. They literally do not have the workforce to take care of the people that are the older generation now.
Having kids so that you'll have someone to look after you when you're older has to be the most selfish thing I've heard all day.
Yeah.
When you look at that, the older generations, the greatest silent and baby boomers, were much more Christianized in their thinking. But when you look at the younger generations, X, Y, the millennials, Generation Z, they're very secular in their thinking. They're very self-absorbed.
So not only are you terrible for not having children, you're terrible because your generation is selfish.
Obviously, yeah. Can we just throw an OK Boomer meme in here? That's all I could think about when he was talking.
You look at statistics in regard to what's going to happen when, as the baby boomers start to die off. I hate to admit it, I'm in that generation, the baby boomers.
There, he fed you. Go for it.
Okay, boomer. Oh, I love it so much.
Yeah.
But when they are starting to die off, there's not the replacement in
Right,
numbers
that's the
from the
thing.
coming generations. And then there's going to be all these houses that they bought, they're going to flood the market.
You're going to crash the society.
The big problems they see with Americans not having enough kids are a lack of elder care and a potential lack of people to buy all the extra houses the previous generation built. At the same time, American conservative Christianity has aligned themselves with a vigorously anti-immigration political stance. There are millions of people around the world who would love to come to buy an American house, pay American taxes, and accept elder care positions. This problem solves itself.
Remember, it's got to be the right kind of people.
Siberia, 18,000-year-old frozen dog stumps scientists. Now, of course, they're going to say it's 18,000 years old, which we know from a biblical standpoint is completely impossible. This was frozen in the permafrost sometime after the flood. They've looked at the DNA and they can't determine what species it is. So they think, because of that, it might be an evolutionary link between wolves and domestic dogs.
And do you know what an evolutionary link is between wolves and domestic dogs? A dog.
A dog.
Because you know what a wolf is? A dog.
Wolf isn't a dog.
They just have such limited understanding of classification of living things. Like, they talk about, like, kinds, and they throw dog kind and cat kind around, never defining what a kind is, other than, you know a dog when you see a dog. Sometimes they'll say things like, oh, this family, this species, but I don't think they know what that means and how it's defined and how it's classified, and yeah, it just annoys me a bit.
I'd say that's probably one of the best evidences for evolution that they give us these days, that a dog is a dog.
Dogs can't give birth to non-dogs. Who else says that?
I don't know what you're referring to.
It just sounded like some other creationist. Can't have been anyone important.
No, I don't think so. Like, they all do the same thing. They're like, a dog can't give birth to a non-dog. And it's like, yeah, we're not saying they can. Like, I think they literally expect, like, a dog to wake up one day and pop out a baby and for it to be, like, a whole new species. And they just, I don't know, they miss the point completely.
Throws off their timeline or whatever. But again, it's a dog. I mean, It's just speciation within the dog kind. Evolutionists and creationists agree that they're all dogs.
I'm very shocked that, as a geneticist, she doesn't understand that it's, like, genetically different from domesticated dogs today. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit concerning.
Exactly. The scientists here aren't calling the transitional species because of aesthetics. Georgia said it before. The discovery here is this preserved specimen had preserved DNA that could be sequenced and compared.
They are admitting everything that the science tells them. They're saying, okay, so today we have dogs and we have wolves, and this is their DNA. And you can see that wolves have this part in common with dogs, and, this is what it is. And now we're saying, oh, look, we found another one which also shares this part of the DNA, but also doesn't. And so it looks like it fits in between here.
Kind of like, I don't know, a transition. Ta-da! That aside, as science enthusiasts, can we just admire how well preserved this specimen is?
Oh my god, I know. His teeth, look at them. I have to say as well, those teeth look surprisingly healthy. Good boy, he took care of his teeth.
So it's
That was
not
a what? What did you say?
I said it was a cold argument.
A what?
Cold argument.
Cold.
Yes, argument.
Oh, because it was frozen?
Yes. I'm here substituting Bodhi.
So
I have to do his job.
Is that a
He's
Brazilian joke?
I feel like she wanted to okay boomer him there. It's like, okay boomer, you just don't get it. It kind of reminds me of how someone else treats women, but I can't think who.
Maybe that's in the creationist kind. It's one of the traits.
All creationist species.
Yeah.
All right, astronomers see stars slinging comets at Earth for the first time. So evolutionists have a really hard time explaining what they call long period comets.
Because people who study biological evolution spend a lot of time talking about comets.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Of course.
So they developed an idea back in the 50s that there was this thing out there called the Oort cloud.
Have you ever heard of this problem before, this idea of short-term comets?
I've not actually, no.
I go into the topic in depth in part 4 of my Science of Genesis Paradise Lost series, for anyone who wants all the detail on Oort clouds. It should be clear that the age of a comet says nothing more about the age of the universe than the fresh milk in my fridge says about the age of my fridge. Basically, creationists note that comets in our solar system last only a few 100,000 years. This is a smaller number than the 13 plus billion years that the universe has existed. So, since obviously things like ice can't simply form later in the process, and must have formed early in the process, this must prove a young Earth. Apparently, newer things can't just be newer.
As long as we understand, nobody's ever seen an Oort cloud.
Yeah, there's no evidence.
Nobody's ever seen anything suck whatever is out there to form the comet.
I really like that no one's ever seen one, it can't be real, is their argument for this, but not God.
Right, that's true.
Can they just listen to themselves one day, please?
The word confident comes from Latin, with faith. So that's, they have faith that they exist, but they have no evidence.
Argument from etymology, I guess?
I hate it when they do that. It's so bizarre.
Have you heard the one, universe?
Uni means single. Verse means a spoken sentence.
We must admit that the universe came from one spoken word.
Flawless. I'm
flawless.
converted, yeah.
I'll chalk that one up to Eric Hovind. Perfect.
Do you think his parents taught... No, it can't be. His parents are probably insignificant.
Probably.
Nope.
And this will be taught in public school science classes.
This likely won't be taught in public school classes. They don't teach every paper that comes out.
He thinks there's just someone there every time a paper's published, being like, oh God, updating the textbooks again.
There's someone in the hallway of the elementary schools every time, yeah.
I'm just imagining like little 7-year-olds having like a new textbook every day. It's like, like 3000th edition.
I know you guys are coloring a turkey right now.
But
we might know how some comets came to be, so stop the press.
By the way, you know how you made that joke, whatever it was, about cold? Somebody here said that is so cool.
That's good.
All right, there we go. Okay, well, we are out of time for today.
Such a boomer. Sorry. Thanks for putting me through that.
All right, well, now we can both go back to our channels and continue to ignoring creationists.
Yes. I mean, I don't know any other creationists except from Ken Ham, really. Like, definitely no one else important.
No one at all. But what is important is that if you're somehow not already subscribed to Rachel Oates' channel, you must fix this immediately, because she's constantly putting out amazing content on a variety of social, science, life, and religious topics that you won't want to miss.
Oh, thank you very much.
As always, a huge thank you to my patrons who make this channel possible. If you're willing and able to help support the channel this year for as little as $1 a month, it can go a long way. Check out the link in the description. Thanks to Rachel. Thank you so much for watching. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Until next time, later.